Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time it is that you're joining me for this video. Thanks once again for clicking on the Penboy Boy Fountain Pen Review channel. The subject of today's video is going to be the Visconti Vertigo Fountain Pen. In 1988, two dudes named Dante Del Vecchio and Luigi Poli established a pen company called Visconti after having their own pen shops. Their objective was to make pens way cooler than anything that was currently out on the market. Their brand reintroduced the use of celluloid in the pens while everyone else was using acrylics and injection molding. One of the more noteworthy aspects about their use of celluloid was they were able to eliminate any issues of uneven dyeing of the celluloid or even brittleness. Even more impressive, they were also able to make the pens without lighting the whole place on fire. Other materials they used also include silver, ebonite, carbon graphite, bachelite, marble, antique ivory, aluminum, adamantium, titanium, resin, acrylic, iridium, lucitite, and of course, basaltic lava. They were also huge in the areas of innovation made to fountain pens. They held numerous patents and designs that were never seen before. Their philosophy, a pen was not simply a pen. It had to be unique, reflecting a beauty and history. It also had to have meaning. It was also something that they wanted the bearer to feel was more personal rather than just being an object. In doing so, they maintained rigid and peak standards for quality control. Maybe not so much with regard to the nibs. Everything was made with a proud respect and the intention to reflect the beauty of what Florence had to offer. It is fitting that the factory is currently in a 15th century villa. Although everything is made in Florence, the nibs are all made in Germany by the nib manufacturer Bach. The specs, designs, and molds, however, are all owned by Visconti. In the year 2005, Luigi Poli bailed on the brand and sold his shares to the major backing entity known as Italian Pens. These are the shareholders that Visconti had hooked up with in order to expand their resources and footing in the industry. It was since this time that these shareholders became the majority shareholders of the brand Visconti. In the year 2007, Visconti hooks up with Coles of London to be the official distributor of Visconti products in the United States of America. In the year 2017, Dante, being the minority shareholder, gets axed from the company. Why was it that Dante was booted from Visconti? Who knows? Maybe the shareholders are tired of new and innovative ideas and wanted to go in a different direction, such as making pens with nib designs that have been done already by other brands that went Chapter 11 and went out of business. That's just my guess. In the year 2018, the Visconti Vertigo was released. That's all I have for the background information. Moving on to the neutral zone. Those elements about the pen that are neither good or bad, or can be good or bad, depending on you. Starting with the nib, it's a number 6 stainless steel fine nib. It features an overlay thong bikini on the top of the nib made of gold. There's a Pen Magazine centerfold joke in here somewhere, but I just can't seem to find it. It is engraved with an F for fine and the brand name. Although this is a newer pen by Visconti, it does not have the newer calligraphy nibs found on the new editions of the Rembrandt pens. The feed is made of ABS plastic. This is the stuff your favorite Lego character is made of. The nib and feed are part of an unscrewable nib unit housed in a standard Bach housing. The nib unit screws into the tapered metal grip section that has a slight tilted flare up to the rim. At the top of the rim of the grip section, we have our magnet used in the magnetic cap. The threads of the grip are metal and screw into the threads on the inside of the body. On the rim of the body are these 4 grooves. These ensure that when capped, the pen as a whole maintains proper alignment so that all the facets line up. The rest of the body is an alternating tapered faceted design. It was designed to give the person looking at it from different angles a feeling of vertigo. The body tapers to the end cap. This here shares the same design and shape as the bigger brother of this pen, the Opera Master. There is a notable difference though. That is that the end cap on the Vertigo is fixed and cannot be moved. This is not a blind cap. Comparing these two pens is like looking at the fountain pen version of the movie Twins. This here Vertigo being the Danny DeVito of Visconti. The cap is the same as the rest of the pen, with the same alternating taper. It tapers to the finial, which maintains the standard My Pen system. Our clip is a standard Ponte Vecchio bridge inspired clip with the brand name laser engraved. The center band is metal, and on the front has the logo V. On the rear, the center band is absolutely nothing at all. It was all packaged in this outer cardboard box we are all familiar with. Inside that is our pretend-to-be leather clamshell box, also very familiar. Inside of that is your pen in the plastic sleeve with your international instructions. There is a pre-installed converter inside this pen. The pen is cartridge converter filled and is not eyedroppable. That's all I have for the neutral zone. Moving on to the good, those elements about the pen that are good. Okay, let's talk about the way this pen writes. I am very surprised with how well it writes. To be honest, I went into this feeling somewhat skeptical. I thought it would be like every other steel nib that Visconti offered. Now, it is a steel nib, but it writes like a savage. It is very smooth and wet. Ink flow is generous. At first, it skipped and hard started a bit, so I went and I cleaned it. After that, it had zero issues. This nib was very well tuned and adjusted and writes like what one would imagine an ideal steel nib would write like. Does it have anything to do with the gold overlay? Not at all. This nib is how every nib that came out of Visconti should write like. Spanking it with gold lingerie doesn't magically make a nib write better. More on that later. This nib just happened to be tuned and adjusted to perfection, and with diligence. Now, since this has the DNA of the Opera Master, let me show it. It has an extra fine palladium nib. This pen is the bigger, better, stronger version of the Vertigo. It has a vacuum filling mechanism and similar facets, only these don't try to make you dizzy. This pen is a touch more than double the price of our Vertigo. This has a price point of $795. Moving on to another Dante creation, the Peniter La Grande Bellezza Gemstone Edition. This pen is about $20 more than the Visconti Vertigo, yet offers more when it comes to a pound-for-pound comparison. For example, the Peniter offers a 14-karat gold nib of a new and unique design by the former Visconti owner. It's made of ground marble and resin and has a magnetic cap that utilizes opposing polarity to cap and uncap it. Going back to a steel nib comparison, let's look at the German nib Jovo on a Diplomat Aero. This pen is $156. Can I say that the nib on the Vertigo writes better than this? Absolutely not. They are different. This has more feedback, which I prefer, whereas our Vertigo is more smoothed out. This, like the Vertigo, is a fine nib. To be honest, in general, I find I prefer Jovo nibs to Bach nibs. Lastly, I want to go to something in a totally different price point. This is the Pen BBS 308 or 266. These are a Chinese-made fountain pen, and the cost is usually between $20 and $30. So far, I personally own about a dozen of these, and I am more than impressed with the quality and quality control that has been consistent from pen to pen. I love turned acrylic pens, and these are awesome, fun, and modern. I love them a lot. Now let's also talk about quality control on the Visconti Vertigo. It's on point. There's nothing really to complain about. Everything is as it should be. This pen has all the elements that one would expect a pen in a high price point to have. That's all I have for the good. Moving on to the bad. Let's talk coin. The MSRP of this pen is $475. However, this can be purchased with online retailers in the US for $380. That's a significant discount on the pen. However, don't forget, this, in all intents and purposes, is a steel nib pen. Some may say that this is a poor man's Opera Master. I like it, but then I was thinking, I don't know. I'm so broke. Thank God this pen only costs $380 was said by 0 poor dudes I ever met. Personally, I don't consider this pen a poor man's Opera Master. I just consider it an expensive pen. Does it have its worth in the design and in the writing experience? Sure, it does. But in terms of sheer pound for pound value, it's a lot of money. I feel like the gold overlaid lingerie is a bit of a trick. If they made the pen with a solid gold nib, no argument, but in this case, I feel that they skimped out. The gold overlay on the nib in any way affecting the writing, in my opinion, is just not possible. The physics to explain that simply don't exist. It does nothing more for the writing experience than wearing your pants before wiping your butt cleans your butt. I'm not saying that the nib isn't fantastic. It totally is. What I am saying is that it's not fantastic because of the gold. It's fantastic because of the nib having been given a proper tuning and adjusting. If you're saying to yourself, but the gold passes over the 2 times where the breather hole is, so maybe that has an effect on something, then I would respond, I'll prove it to you in the ugly. Having said that, moving on to the ugly. Those elements about the pen that should not be, but are. So going back to the gold overlay, if you take a close look at the overlay in relation to the steel part of the nib from the side, you will notice that the gold part doesn't sit flush against the nib. It is raised above it and doesn't actually make contact with the nib. It also doesn't ever make contact with the ink either. So this notion of it having some effect on the writing experience in the way of ink flow or performance is psychosomatic at best. Could it act as a shock absorber, being gold is a denser metal? Possibly, but I don't buy it. If it does, I would say that it's not enough material to make any perceivable difference unless you convince yourself that it does. But going back to the pen, other than this, the pen is otherwise flawless. It is well made, has quality control that is above reproach. So, enough of the ugly. It's high noon, decision-making time. Should you or should you not pull the trigger on this pen? The long-standing philosophy was one that was born of an ideology that pens should not merely be an item of utility, rather a unique personal and meaningful experience and piece of art used to express a person's self. They were also intended to reflect the pride and beauty that Florence had to offer. This was something that Dante stuck to with all his creations and designs. But he's not with Visconti anymore, and this is a pen that exposed that fact, at least in some aspects. Visconti has been responsible for some of the most awesome pens reflecting the aforementioned ideologies. They include the Homo sapiens, a pen that pays homage to the beginning of recorded human history, unique in its design and material. There was also the Divina, a pen that pays homage to the golden ratio and to Leonardo da Vinci. The Medici? This pen pays homage to the Italian Renaissance as well as the Medici family, even the special editions that pulled a higher price point, such as the Florentine Hills. This paid homage to the hills of Florence. And then we have our Vertigo. It's a small version of the Opera Master, minus the filling system and the precious metal nib, designed to make you dizzy when you stare at it like a weirdo. It just doesn't have the same depth in terms of the history and meaning. And these missing elements is problematic. The reason? The depth in the history and meaning are elements that many identify and therefore find justifiable in paying the cost of the pens, such as the pens that I mentioned. So does this pen have other elements that justify the cost? Sure, but you also have to ask, can these elements be had with another pen at a much lesser price? Or even, could a pen with more be had for the same cost? The answer is yes, in both cases. However, in both cases, whether it's a pen that costs less or a pen that costs more, the Vertigo is the only one that will give you both the interesting alternating tapered facets and the nib with the sexy dong bikini on it. So if those are elements that you don't need to have, then I would say hold off. However, if the design of the facets and the gold nib overlay is something that you find appealing, then there is no other option available. You must pull the trigger on this pen. Additionally, if $380 is a drop in the bucket for you, then you're going to love this pen for sure. But if you're the type of person that has to save up and sacrifice to attain this pen, there is the possibility of buyer's remorse that could follow if you're not completely cognizant or comfortable with the cost to feature ratio of this pen. That was my review on the Visconti Vertigo fountain pen. I hope it helped. Check out the script below for discounts to Goldspot pens as well as how to follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you to my good friends at Goldspot Pens for the support and lending me this pen for review, and thank you, viewers and subscribers, for staying with me. I love you guys. Be well, be safe.